Hey guys, Chris here. I'm a Ukrainian Canadian. Today is August 7th, 2023, and let's get to the news happening in Ukraine, shall we? So, first things first, I want to do a big map update today. And first of all, the Ukrainian army right now in the direction of Velika Novosilka are advancing towards the village of Urozhaine. So, a few weeks ago, the Ukrainians took Staromayorsk officially from the Russian military, and right beside Staromayorsk is the village of Urozhaine. And so now there are reports from pro-Russian sources that the Ukrainians have entered the north of the village and are already in control over several blocks of Urozhaine. So most likely in the foreseeable future, the Russians will lose control over this village. This will allow the Ukrainians to push further down towards Zaporizhzhia and the other villages that are bordering the valley of Mokryale, so the little river that passes through this series of villages. Now, there's also more developments around Robotne. The Ukrainians are now advancing and entering the very first line of defense that were built by the Russian forces in that area, which is a positive sign. Yet again, we know that the difficulties in advancing very quickly for the Ukrainian army is mainly due to the fact of the deep trench network that the Russians have built, the minefields, and also their helicopters, which have been unfortunately effective at targeting Ukrainian convoys and groupings. But the good news is that not only are the Ukrainians advancing closer and closer to Robotne, which is one of the key villages that the Ukrainians need to take before they can get to Tokmak. But they've also shut down a Ka-52 helicopter today. The 47th Brigade confirms that, and even the pro-Russian Telegram channels are confirming the destruction of one of their Ka-52 today with a manpad. So it's good to see that the Ukrainians are capable of hitting these helicopters because they are operating kind of far behind the Ukrainian offensive line, and they're being quite effective. But it's good to see that the Ukrainians are still capable of hitting them. And one less pilot is always going to be great. Now, also let's take a look at the general map so we can take a look in more detail of the general situation, not only in Zaporizhzhia, but in the north of Ukraine. So I've already discussed the Orikhiv axis and the Velika Novosilka axis. And you can see that closer to Vasilivka, this was another axis that the Ukrainians did open in the early phase of their counteroffensive. But it seems like they have stopped their attacks here, and I think that they perhaps are prioritizing their concentration of forces here in Orikhiv and Velika Novosilka. Perhaps they transferred some of the forces that were meant to attack here towards Orikhiv. Mainly due to the fact that perhaps the Ukrainians are not capable of having multiple fronts open at the same time. So they probably would just keep a few defense brigades here, defending the front line, and then pushing with more efficiency and more power towards Robotne and Velika Novosilka. The goal right now, I think, for Velika Novosilka is to get through Zaporizhzhia and then a key village is Staromlenivka. So it's a village of about 2,500 people, but the importance of this village lies in its intersections that it has. There is a road that leads into the west of Zaporizhzhia and into the east of Donetsk Oblast. And then there's another road that goes and heads south that kind of follows the Mokryale River. And then eventually, the Ukrainians, I think, their main goal is to get to Volnovakha, which is a little bit down here, right? It's a major railway hub. And so the Ukrainians, I think, are planning to go towards Volnovakha through Velika Novosilka. I think it's one of the main goals right now, as there's a railway line that passes through Volnovakha. And the Russians, in the early phase of the war, fought very hard for over a month in Volnovakha against the Ukrainian forces to take it around February and March. So I think Volnovakha is an extremely important village to retake for the Ukrainian forces. And also you can see in Vuhledar, the Ukrainians launched a small little counteroffensive, which, as you can see, has been successful. They regained and liberated some territory around the city of Vuhledar. This one is slower, and I don't think the Ukrainians are going to really have a big breakthrough here because the Russians have a lot of forces concentrated here around the Vuhledar area, and they've been trying to get Vuhledar for at least the very minimum since January of this year. the beginning of this year. So that's the situation in Zaporizhzhia. Now, if we're going towards Donetsk city and all its suburbs and its the general Donetsk area, you can see that the Ukrainians are currently also holding the line. They've had a series of successful small gains around Avdiivka, as you can see here in green. Additionally, also more west, I should say, of Donetsk. There's also another gain that the Ukrainian forces have had around Krasnohorivka. So overall here, there's just small little gains throughout the front line, but nothing really meaningful. But the Ukrainians are also holding the line here. And this is a really, really well-defended Russian-controlled front. So here I'm not really expecting any major breakthroughs from the Ukrainian side. And it's not really an important front line in terms of the counteroffensive for the Ukrainian forces. Really, the most important right now, I think, is the Orikhiv axis, because Tokmak, heading into Tokmak and taking Tokmak, and then having the potential to head into Melitopol will really be a key for the Ukrainian counteroffensive for it to be successful in the future. And the last front is obviously north of Ukraine, so that is more Bakhmut, Lysychansk, Kremina, Svatove, and Kupiansk. So here, the Russians have amassed a large grouping of Russian forces. Again, about 100,000 Russian soldiers have been moved to this front. And so the Ukrainians are currently holding the line here. It's stable, but not stable in the sense that nothing is happening, because the Russians continue their small attacks on different fronts, whether it be north of Kupiansk, around Liman Pershi, or around the area of Svatove. It is difficult, but the Ukrainians are currently able to hold the line, which is really good. And some more positive indications is the fact that the Ukrainians have regained some lost territory. I think about 2-3 weeks ago, the Russians launched an attack here around the area of Raihorodka and Kovalivka, and they captured a little bit of territory here. You can see that the Ukrainians counterattacked, and they've regained their positions south of Svatove here, around the area of Kovalivka. So this is a good indication that the Ukrainian forces are capable of holding the line in the north, as this is not a priority for them. And in Bakhmut, it's pretty much the same. Nothing has really changed since my last update around Bakhmut. The Ukrainians are really putting a lot of effort in the south of the city. As you can see, they're trying to find a breakthrough through either Klishivka, Andriivka, or Kurdyumivka. And so far, you can see there's a lot of Russian forces here. They're constantly plugging the holes they have in the defenses. So, so far, nothing really has changed so far in the last few days in Bakhmut either. So that's pretty much it for the north and the south of Ukraine. Another little update is that yesterday the Ukrainians successfully attacked and damaged a bridge that goes to the Arabat Spit towards Henichesk. As you can see here, I think this is where the missiles hit the specific bridge in question. And so the Arabat Spit is a very, very thin spit, as you can see, and a very good shortcut for the Russian forces that are transporting, supplies to the front line. As you can see here, instead of going through Primorsky towards Jankoy, they can take a detour through this very thin strip of land, the Arabat Spit, and then go into Henichesk and then resupply their forces in Zaporizhzhia. And so the Ukrainians damaged the bridge, and there's photos of this damage. There's a lot of holes in that specific bridge here. And so hopefully the Ukrainians will continue to hit, because it hasn't been severely damaged to the point that the Russians can use it anymore. So I think that the Ukrainians need to continue using their Storm Shadows and other long-range missiles to destroy all of these bridges that are connecting Crimea to Kherson. And they have been doing so in the last few weeks. So the intensity, I think, is going to pick up. And I'll tell you why, because in my next slide, I'll show you the Ukrainians are also receiving some very good, potentially receiving some good little gifts from the West. So I'll tell you more about this in the next few seconds. And the last little update is in Kherson. So the Ukrainians, I haven't really talked a lot about the Kherson front by Kherson city, but the Ukrainians still hold control, have a bridgehead by the Oleshki area. So the Russians have not been able to dislodge the Ukrainian forces here. We still have to see what the game plan is. I know that they have a bridgehead, but eventually something needs to happen here from the Ukrainian side. So it will be interesting to follow for the next couple of weeks what the Ukrainian move is going to be here. Will they be able to move a lot of vehicles and forces to be able to eventually take on Oleshki? Because taking on Oleshki and capturing this city will really be beneficial for the Ukrainians to then threaten the Russians in the west of Kherson, and essentially this will cause another dilemma for the Russian forces, who have now concentrated most of their defenses in Zaporizhzhia. Will they have to move some of their forces from Zaporizhzhia to the west of Kherson? So that is going to be interesting to see how that develops as well. So overall, the Ukrainians still have the initiative. The Ukrainians are still moving forward. It's not a fast movement, but it is a momentum that the Ukrainians still currently have, albeit the Russians are trying to break that momentum and that initiative through their own small attacks, or large attacks, I should say, from the area of Kremina all the way up to Svatove. They're trying to disrupt the Ukrainian momentum, but so far it's not working for the Russians. And the last little update I wanted to discuss is the gifts that Ukraine could potentially receive. First of all, it's from Germany. So Germany is still in discussions, and it seems to be heading in the direction that Ukraine will be receiving German Taurus long-range missiles. And so this was mentioned by Yehor Chernyev, who is the head of permanent delegation of the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine to the NATO Parliamentary Assembly. So the Taurus missile is going to give a huge boost for the Ukrainian capabilities to hit long-distance Russian targets, whether it be in Crimea or even in Russia, because they have about a range of 500 kilometers, and they can also be launched from aircraft. The Taurus, what really makes it particularly good is that it is extremely accurate. It has a lot of good sensors and good tech packed into this small little missile, and it's capable of hitting targets even in extreme adverse weather conditions. So even if it's raining, a stormy day, this missile is almost guaranteed to hit its target. So, and it has a very good payload of explosives. I think it's about 480 kilos, if I'm not mistaken. Somebody can correct me in the comment section if I'm not correct here. So that is great. So hopefully Ukraine's going to get them in nearby future. They need them right now. So hopefully by August, we'll be seeing these Taurus flying somewhere in Crimea and Russia. Second of all, now there's a confirmation that the United States will be giving the first batch of Abrams tanks to Ukraine. And the first batch of Abrams tanks that the US is providing to Ukraine was approved for shipment over the weekend. And the tanks are on track to arrive in Ukraine by early fall, which the Army Acquisition Chief Doug Bush said on Monday. And I believe it's about 30 Abrams tanks that are going to be available for the Ukrainians in the fall. Now, again, these are great. This is great to help the Ukrainian offensive. But we know that Ukraine, again, needs far more than just a few missiles and a few tanks. 30 tanks could be enough for perhaps one front that the Ukrainians have, whether it be in Lviv and Bakhmut. So Ukraine needs to continuously receive this military help. So let's hope that that's the case, and that the West finally picks up the pace, and we hear these news on a weekly basis, because unfortunately Ukraine is fighting one of the largest militaries of the world, and Russia still has and will have a lot of tanks, a lot of vehicles, and a lot of men to defend themselves. So that's the video for today, guys. Thank you so much for your support of this channel, your support for Ukraine's cause. And I will make a new video in the next few days. So thank you for your support, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.